I was off. I'm doing it again.
Wow.
It's live TV. We can do a redo if we want to.
I did a redo last week. It was just me and Colin, and nobody was on yet. So,
yeah. Welcome to Cabbage Cafe, everyone. We have currently Jamie Lowell, Rick Thompson, Deborah Young, and Jim Salame on the video.
That's all true. And then Colin's going to join us in a little bit, and then we have some great guests. But let's check out our wonderful sponsors. All right, of course, to ham these guys up, again, they really support what we're doing, and that is getting good information recorded on record every week, whether it's important, interesting, whatever it is, we get it on there. And
it's always important and interesting. That's all we do.
It could be a little bit of everything, but in the midst of a bunch of other stuff, we do get some good information recorded every week, and that's been an important task for a long time. So, so I just want to say something real quick. Then I'll talk a little bit about the MCMA thing. Probably be a perpetual update on that as this remains a big issue for us. But I went to the Peace Fest. Deb was there. Jen Lindemann, goes by Jen Bronson online on social media, came down and met a lot of us. That was kind of cool. And she's probably joining us later on the show today, too, to give us an update on some of the work that she's been doing. But that's not supposed to be up there right now. Sorry about that.
Jim Salame, state senator, cannabis law reform advocate.
Well,
all right, Jim.
And then, so we are going to have Senator Irwin on, and that's known, but we'll be giving him those credits when he's actually on. Off a little bit on these bells and whistles today, but that's going to happen.
A little
there was a little typo in one of the memes that was put out recently. It was short-lived, but my use of it contained the typo. Somebody brought it out, and I responded, "Hey, we might not be perfect, but we are on the right side of history." So any mistake made here, just remember that. Anyway, we went to this Peace Fest, and it was pretty cool, man. A lot of the old timers were there. Great music.
It was awesome.
Good people. It was really cool. Unfortunately, it lasted all day. But early in the day, we got to witness half a block away while this is all going on. Great music, people smoking joints, having a good time. We saw, a paramilitary invasion on somebody's home. Now, it might be that they were getting a violent person extracted from the home who was involved in a highway shooting the day before of a young person. So if that's the case, all good.
No, it was not all good because there were children's toys on the sidewalk in front of this house. There were little bikes and stuff, and they jumped out with guns and a big tank type.
That's uncool. I mean,
it was crazy.
That's uncool. But if there is a really dangerous situation, if people's lives are threatened, as would be in this case, somebody's armed, they've demonstrated that they're willing to shoot a kid. That's the time when you have the extra measures and extra protections and stuff. Not when somebody's got some plants inside or something like that.
Well, we don't know what came on. We never found out.
We don't know for sure, but we heard that was one of the possibilities. But regardless, it was such an irony to have the Peace Fest just feet away from a paramilitary invasion.
And of course there was it just continued like nothing
just kept
was going
going
on. Yeah, it just kept going like this was not happening literally like across the street from us. It was happening. We saw it
half a block down the street. Yeah. But what turned me off a little bit was a couple of the old timers showed up, and I didn't see any. There probably were city police officers involved, but definitely sheriff and state police were involved.
Police, and then guys in like military gear. Yeah. Even though the vehicle said state police, it was one of those big tactical, vehicles that they used to. It was
multi-jurisdictional, and so on. There could have been Oakland County people involved.
Didn't know where Peace Fest was. Our national viewers who aren't familiar with Detroit, that this is where the Peace Fest was held, was in Detroit.
Oh, I'm sorry, Rick. We're getting technical about what we're talking about, and you just meant to tell people about where we are.
Yeah.
So it's a cool little spot in Detroit. There'll be other events there and all that kind of stuff. I just wanted to bring that up, but I didn't like the fact that a couple old timers in our group there were going, "Oh, good, they're getting some of those drug dealers off the street."
Right, they did.
So we don't really know what it was, but that type of spiel was just not.
We don't know.
working for me.
And a couple of times in the past few years, they've come down, to grab somebody out of some house, and the same thing. There's children's toys on the porch and bikes, and little kids get killed. They had a little girl shot through the window. Ariana, what's her name, shot through the window. This is very dangerous. When children's toys are there, I don't see how you jump out with huge guns and start storming a house without clearing it. Nobody did anything.
Here's a question for you guys. I mean, I wasn't there. I wish I would have made it. I was out of town, but were there people like civilians, let's say,
yes,
filming this with their phones? Was that?
Yeah, I recorded.
What was the reaction of you folks that were all there smoking? Were you just looking out the corner of your eyes, or were you guys like kind of moving towards
Jamie and I ran to the fence. Jamie and I.
I saw two big ass
chilling.
Michigan State police vehicles coming up, and I thought they were coming for us because they were right there. I'm like, what the fuck are you guys want?
And I look over my shoulder and there's all these cars coming. So Jamie and I went to the corner of the fence and started recording it, watched it. But most of the people didn't pay much attention. People walked over and looked a little bit and then went back. Like Jamie said, some people made weird remarks like, "Oh, good, take down a drug dealer" or something. That they appeared to be serious with these remarks. And no shots were fired. But these guys, I mean, they
saw
were
these guys holding their people at gunpoint right in the middle of the street or on the sidewalk.
Yeah, they grabbed some guy on the sidewalk and like 20 of them jumped on him, and it was like a big frenzy. And then he disappeared. I don't know what happened to him. And then they still were out there with their big gun. I mean, they had long guns and big shields, and they were in paramilitary outfits.
And that huge military vehicle that last week's night somebody made like John what's his face is making fun of. Yep.
It was really
so anyway I just wanted to point that out, but overall that was very cool, and
it was a very cool event except for the
except for having to witness that.
Right, that was it.
I just hope that it was for some kind of justifiable purpose, because I really didn't like seeing all that extravagant drama over.
I didn't see anything on the news about it at all, and I made a point of looking to see, did something come down? I didn't see anything. And
were there wax stations? People could smoke wax and concentrates at the Peace Fest?
No.
I suppose somebody could have you're outside and you're kind of fend for yourself. There's no place to plug in or something, but somebody could have created a space for some of that to go on. But I think most of us were old school joint smokers, and that's mainly.
We were smoking joints, kind of clustered around in chairs. They set up a bunch of chairs outside, and they had a staged area with a tent over it, because it drizzled earlier during the day, and it was basically people just smoking weed and listening to the first live music I've heard in a year and a half. That was so awesome. Ray was so good. I mean, he was incredible, and of course, John Sinclair was great. And he was accompanied on a guitar. It was just great.
Well, Jeff Grant, who's a great guitar player.
Right. Then they had a real bluesy rock kind of thing, and people would just get up and jam, for a song, and then sit down, and then somebody else would come up, and then it'd be 8 people jam, and then 4, and then 6. It was really incredibly cool. Professional grade stuff too.
Yep, all good. Oh man, the last couple bands were quite fantastic.
Yeah, they were really good.
Go ahead, Rick. Sorry.
Put some information up on the chat about $600 or some raised from the Peace Fest. That's a fantastic total
I'll put that back up. Yeah, I mean, just to let you know, this was a pretty straightforward thing. This was designed around having people get together and have a great time with some pretty cool people and with some great music, and that's what it was.
Awesome. Yeah.
Thanks to Michael.
It's very awesome.
And everybody who participated in that. So I think there's some pretty encouraging stuff going on with the MCMA thing. They are not backing off as far as we know. So I'm not trying to claim,
you got to get background for our listeners, so Jamie.
Sure. The MCMA is the Manufacturers Association, made up of a lot of huge investors who we have been upset about even before we realized and had evidence of a lot of the work that they were doing in Lansing to try to peel back rights and create more burdens for caregivers and to make it more difficult for small businesses to flourish. And it's going to be an ongoing issue because, as I said, they're not backing off. But and again, we should give some credit to Medical Mondays. They've had a couple of great shows on this, brought in some pretty high-powered guests, affiliated with all this stuff, put out some memes that have really gotten some reach. Yep. And one of the guys they had on was Rez Khan, who's the president of DNA Genetics, and they are affiliated with one of the MCMA members. And this all kind of caught them by surprise. And he wanted to come on their show and discuss their point of view. And ultimately, he kept on saying that he totally agreed with us, and that he would put his money where his mouth is and figure out what's going on in Michigan and what needs to be done, and offer resources in Lansing and elsewhere to help us take the position of defending people's rights and not allowing, these large resourceful people to use their influence on lawmakers and state departments to benefit themselves. And he went on to say he would publicly do this, and in contradiction to his contractual partner in that organization, and make it known. And he's taken some efforts now to get meetings and to learn about this and to pledge more. And we'll ultimately see what we can point to when we get some action going. But I think that's really cool. I think that's a really great development that's come out of this, and it's potentially going to be very helpful to us. And I believe he'll get some other people too who are in those similar situations. He mentioned a few names yesterday, and that might kind of follow suit a little bit, and that just makes our position a lot easier. So here we go. Here's one of the conversations that we've had. Right. So he doesn't quite sound like Randy, because Randy distanced themselves, but then said that they still supported taking away caregiver rights and that type of stuff. So
Randy being Randall Buckman
from Pleasantries, and they did leave as a result of this, boycott, this thing that was started, and that Berg and Roach have done a lot with. And they came on their show, and they were happy about leaving MCMA because of this controversy. But as it turns out, they weren't prepared to say that they disagreed with the mission of MCMA. So what benefit that was to them, we're not sure yet. But one of the differences is Rez is very clear about what his position is, and it aligns with ours. He understands that they didn't vet through. I don't want to speak for him. I mean, at some point he'll be on other interviews on Medical Mondays again, maybe on here again, and we can talk about it. We can use his own words, but he didn't do that extensive vetting of them and find out what was going on here, and he admits that. But he says, they also didn't do the same for him. And had they would have known that when they start taking this type of position that he is not going to be in alignment with it. And again, he is promising some action. He's already been proactive in some ways. And at some point, hopefully there will be some things of substance to point to that were done because he decided to take this position. So that's a difference. And I appreciate it.
Don't you think that happens a lot with organizations, new organizations, that people join them and then it kind of all shakes out in the wash? People find out it's not quite, what they thought it was, or it wasn't what it was represented to them.
Yeah, it happens in movements a lot, for sure.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have the same end game idea, and then things get started, and you realize the different approaches that many people have, and they come into conflict and cause stress. Yeah. And that type of thing.
I don't know the guy, and I don't know if he's sincere or not, but I mean, I know that happens with organizations a lot. So
it was suggested. Go ahead, Rick.
People can interview really well and then deliver poorly. It happens in relationships too. Almost anytime you're talking about that, and especially in advocacy where there's more of a non-professional atmosphere about the contact. So when you're in an employment situation or when you're in a business relationship, there is a certain amount of respect due. And Rez has really spoken out quite clearly that he supports caregivers. The whole controversy is centered around a small group of cannabis millionaires that are trying to change the law in Michigan to take away cultivation rights from caregivers and patients, to reduce caregiver rights by 80% and take patient growing rights away by 70%. And we're basically in Michigan aligning ourselves with those who support reducing caregiver rights and those who do not. And it's the process of choosing who's on which side. And it's ugly, and it's going to be personal, and it's not going to be positive for the industry. But at this particular point, to stop changes to the caregiver system that we don't believe in, this is the necessary step that the community's taken. It's been decentralized, but it is a step that is being taken.
So, and somebody brought up an angle yesterday that made a lot of sense, and we should bring it up for historical perspective anyway. The person who started this organization, MCMA, and is known as I guess a Republican lobbyist, or a very well-connected Republican lobbyist, a guy named Steve Linder. This is not the first group that he's led through a process of trying to effect changes to benefit those who want to, to pay him to do so. And it could be he's already won in some respects. I mean, he's been paid a lot. Whether or not they are successful, he's pitched an idea to these people, and he's already made his money on it. I mean, that's his professional job, is to do that kind of stuff, and he's achieved it, I guess, in this case.
Think about this, though. You have a professional reputation, especially with the lobbying industry, too. And Steve Linder was in all kinds of news media for the entire first half of 2021, talking about Delta 8, talking about hemp regulations, talking about THC and driving issues. He was commenting all over the place. And we've smashed him with this boycott thing, and guess what? Radio silence. Absolutely no Steve Linder sightings in like weeks now. That's a complete change in behavior, and you can definitely attribute that to the boycott and to the embarrassment that his own words caused himself and his organization.
Yeah, he'll pop up somewhere, though. He'll be back.
Well, they just got a new leader in
Just
that
licking his
organization,
wounds.
right? Didn't they just hire someone from the MRA to help lead?
Well, from the former director of LARA, before the MRA, I think, was established, or just as it was.
So that's interesting.
Shelley Edgerton, who is a very capable, connected person, who's a professional. Yeah. And we don't know what her personal feelings are about this, but when somebody hires her to do a job, she's very effective.
And I think that she does her homework. So I know she knows what she's dealing with. She's a sharp woman. We've heard her speak several times. Yeah. So I don't know what to say about that.
When you talk about leadership, Shelley Edgerton is listed in the one and only one news media report ever saying about it, as the board chair. And since she came in, we've heard nothing. In the past, some of the MCMA members were trying on their own to establish their own version of what the right side of the story was, and just tripping over their own feet as they dug deeper holes for themselves, trying to explain why they didn't belong in a hole in the first place. But with Shelley on board, there has been no communication with them. Now, it's also important to note that the legislative calendar figures into this. Thursday, which is in 2 days, is the last day that this legislature will meet until September. They'll meet 1 day in July, 1 day in August, but those are just housekeeping things. September, they resume. So it's possible and probably a good idea for them to be quiet and let this whole thing die down over the summer break, and then come back with a vengeance once September hits. Try and get your bill introduced, try and get it passed as quickly as possible, and try and put it along with stuff that means the governor won't veto it. And that's likely to be the pathway they'll take.
So Adam wants to point out that Shelley was working with Live Well, which is one of the MCMA members. So that makes sense that she would then be in line to come into this role with her experience and ability. And then the other thing is, even though there will be a break for legislative action over the summer, this organization is still very likely to be in contact with the lawmakers and keeping the pressure on them to effectuate the changes that they want. And so we could be doing the same. And Colin has just joined us. You know what? And we haven't spun this around, and I guess we could. We've all been part of a discussion here. But, there's enough in the air here to kind of like reflect on. And we should give an opportunity for people to do that, I think, before Senator Irwin joins us for a very interesting.
And it's almost 4:20.
Yeah.
Well,
that's why you came on to tell us that, right?
Yeah. It's almost 4:20, and
I better get on now.
Hi, John.
Jenny Lindemann is joining us.
Hey.
A little bit early, and we'll introduce her more and talk to her a little bit more, particularly after the interview with Senator Irwin. But hear about some of the accomplishments in Flushing and some of the new challenges that are coming up. I know last night that there was a meeting. I think it was in Clinton Township, Jen.
Clinton Township.
Yeah, is that last night?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the trustees met on that, and they pretty much just kind of like went over what they have so far, and it was unanimously voted to go to planning. So planning is going to be working on that, and I hope to stay in the loop and attend the planning commission meeting and basically just treat it like Flushing.
Yeah. Sure. Well, we'll get into that a little bit more later, but thanks for joining us. Be a part of the conversation as much as you'd like, and we're talking a little bit about the MCMA and their efforts to try to peel back caregiver rights and make it more difficult for small businesses to flourish, and then another angle on trying to attack the current systems and laws that we have in place and that type of thing. But we're talking about some encouraging things from within the organization, with DNA Genetics claiming that they're going to come here and offer resources and be in public opposition to their contractual partners in that organization. That's very interesting. That's kind of, I think, what we want to spin around with is the thoughts on what's going on now and how positive or pessimistic maybe somebody might be on what's happening. Rick, why don't you see what's happening out there?
Well, I keep an eye on the national news, and I see parallels. And a couple things that you can note. Remember when redistricting was a big thing, and all the states seemingly redistricted at the same time? Now in 2021, all these voter restrictions seem to be coming up in all these states simultaneously, and they look remarkably similar. We see the same thing in the cannabis industry too. This move against home cultivation, this move against caregivers, move to limit licenses, move to tax THC based or tax medicine based on THC content. These are things that are popping up in multiple states at once. It all speaks to a larger game at play, and let's never be confused. Michigan is absolutely one of the most ripest cherries on the tree. Our population is very cannabis friendly. We're one of the larger populations in the United States of America, and we're uniquely situated to facilitate intra-state travel as well as a vacation paradise. So there's a lot of reasons why someone would want to manipulate law in Michigan. But when I see the same thing popping up in other states, it's easy for us to just draw our bead right on multi-state operators. If you have your feet in multiple states and you see fuckery going on of a similar nature in both states, it's easy to draw the parallel there too. But we must also remember some of the worst enemies are people that just operate inside Michigan. They're just out to make a buck, and they don't really have an interest in other states. So we have to be careful about who we label as the enemy and who we label as friends. Most of the cannabis retailers in Michigan support caregiver rights. Most of the retailers in Michigan, most of the cultivators, don't want caregiver rights restricted. It's a very narrow margin of people that actually do. We have to make sure that we're confining our anger to those people, and that we're not having some collateral damage from other retailers and other licensees that support our businesses. Having said that, sick people deserve extra rights, not fewer rights. And any program that looks to reduce the number of plants a patient can grow to a number less than what an average citizen can grow, that's a non-starter with me. Let's go to Deborah Young. Deb, your thoughts on the controversy?
Yeah, I have to agree. Anything that's gonna fuck with the caregivers' rights is just ridiculous. I mean, this comes up all the time, but now it seems even more real. It seems even more intense than it's been in the past. I think it's really important to look ahead at who we're going to elect into elected office, because we have to have people in there who are not going to facilitate this type of action. Because right now, we have at least a governor who's not hostile towards it. I mean, anybody could get in there. We know what happened with Snyder. We know what would happen if it had been Schuette. We have to be real careful and make sure that this kind of crap doesn't come down in Michigan. Of course, we always knew when we were working on legalization that this was going to be something that was going to come down, that they were going to come down and say, well, why do we need caregivers now? I mean, you can just go to the corner store and buy. You can do this, you do that. So that's really important. I'm encouraged by new legalization states like New York, who have a pretty high level of a home grow. I think we were told 12 plants, and you can keep like up to whatever they produce or something, glorious like that. So, I'm encouraged by that because it looks like it gets more liberal and more liberal and more liberal. But then you have the nutcases who always pop up, like the Steve Linder jackass. Like Jamie said, this guy has made his money. Whether he even believes any of this shit, we don't even know. He's in it for the cash, and that's it. And they pay him, and he does what he does very well. And there's creepy people like that in every business. And as long as we keep pushing back, I think we'll be okay. But we're going to have Jeff Irwin on tonight. This is the kind of person we have to make sure are in leadership positions. So I'm going to fight to maintain caregiver grows. I think that it's just ridiculous. We can't turn back. I'm against reopening the whole thing at all, because even though there are things that need correcting, caregivers should be able to grow even more. Caregivers should be able to keep, everything that they grow, not limited to, just a little amount that they're allowed to keep. But I don't want to risk any of that. Right now, caregivers, I think we're cool. We've learned how to work within the system, and we're cool. So, people should not be messing with caregivers.
Right on.
And when we talk about putting those things at risk, what we're really meaning is in order to affect caregiver law, you have to have a 3/4 supermajority of the legislature, because it's a voter-directed initiative here in Michigan. Mm-hmm. And that means it's super hard to do, so you can almost never accomplish it. But this year, the Marijuana Regulatory Agency is going to try and push open both the legalization program and possibly the medical program in order to combine the licensing programs for both the medical and the recreational. And that's the place that we're worried that the dark forces, as we sometimes call them, will slide in amendments that include changes we don't agree with, Deb.
For sure. That's exactly what we're talking about here. And so, I don't want to even open that Pandora's box at all. I just, it's the way it should be. Leave it alone. Don't mess with caregivers, because patients need caregivers.
Yep. Jim Salam, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, the law started in 2008 for caregivers and a medical law here in Michigan. That went on for a long time. And you look at 2 years ago, we finally got into rec. So for quite a while, we were teaching people about cannabis. Caregivers were making tailor-made medicines for particular ailments people had, and I mean, it was an amazing part of the industry, and to be part of that growth and to see it, and for these companies to come in and not understand that and understand the community that was built and want to just kind of wash that out so they can make more money is just, to me, unforgivable. It's like, why go somewhere else then? I mean, we have a really great community where we're working with people, and the fact that rec has already taken a lot of the medical side that we used to rely on away is a whole nother discussion. But yeah, please stay away from the caregivers. It's ridiculous. So thank you.
To put a finer point on some of these details, the Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association is made up of about 13 different companies, and those 13 companies are the one that are really trying to institute change to the caregiver laws. And the change they would like is to reduce the plant count allotment for caregivers with the purpose of driving those patients into the recreational retail stores in order to make their purchases of cannabis. What that really ignores, though, is that there's a dominant, overpowering, ever-present black market where patients can go to, and they are likely to go to if they know that you, the licensed retailer, are the instrument by which their caregiver was undone. They're not ever going to love you. They're not ever going to give you their dollars. They're going to hate you for the rest of your miserable retail life. So it's a poorly designed concept that can't really result in the designed outcome that they wished. Colin McDougall, you're a man of the world. You're also a muted man of the world. Your thoughts on this concept, please.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've said it a couple times before, but I grew up with the caregiver market, and I don't want to see it changed at all. It really horrifies me that like these companies just are that profit driven that they would try and unflip every rock they can to like get whatever they want. And I don't know, I just I don't trust I said before, I sold this stuff like at the dispensary, and when like they kicked the caregivers out of the market, they gave us like basically it was North, which is Green Peak, and High Life, and those are two of those companies that are in the MCMA, and it was like really just, I don't know, I wouldn't pay like the prices that they were selling them at, and like it was just so expensive at first, and it was like, I don't know, it was just too much for like the crummy quality and just the amount. You know, I'm gonna try and like just stay away from brands like that. I'm gonna let people know what brands I believe are like not cool, and I'm gonna let people know about like which companies are them, just actively, you know, in my circles, and just I don't know. People are always asking me about marijuana because it seems like I'm like that person who knows a lot, and you know, even just people who don't know marijuana. And so you know, I know some good brands out there if I need to use the dispensary. For the most part, you know, I'm comfortable with caregivers, and yeah. But yeah, I just there's one thing I do like care for. I don't think we really should combine the acts, like in a way. I think that's kind of like it's not like the marijuana community's like idea. It's mainly driven by the MRA. I think that the one thing that needs to be done to open up this act is just to like allow the kids to be able to use medical marijuana at schools. And like, I know that there is a House bill that does that, and that's you know, a harm of, you know, opening up that act.
Yeah, we definitely support removing restrictions that are unnecessary and that get in the way of something that's sensible, like kids being able to use their medicine.
Yeah,
on school grounds. So, Kyle, we are being joined now by Senator Irwin.
Hello, everyone. Oh, okay. Seeing who's all in here.
All
Nice
right.
to see many of you again. Sorry if my camera or audio is not ideal, but my laptop is just not a very capable machine, so I'm joining on my phone today.
Thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it a lot. We just got a couple things we definitely want to talk about. And
Can you turn your phone to the side though and go landscape mode?
Wow.
Now a little readjustment. Maybe the
Classic
There you go.
Yeah, bring your
The
head
smile
down.
works though. All right, Senator Irwin. So thank you very much for joining us. I think you basically know everybody on this panel. We are joined in addition by Jenny Lindeman, who's done a lot of great work in Flushing Township and other places, working against prohibitive ordinances and things like that. And we're going to talk with her about that a little bit more later on in the show. But she's bringing some good energy to our community.
Great.
So there's a fundraiser coming up for you and for your second term of being senator, and that, you know, means that your campaign started, and that's definitely one of the things we kind of want to talk about is, you know, you're starting your mission to get reelected.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously, thank you for an opening to, you know, make a pitch for my own campaign. But yeah, I have been really honored to serve the people of the 18th District here in Washtenaw County, representing, you know, communities like Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti, and this, you know, Ypsilanti Township and Pittsfield Township and Saline and York Township and Milan and Augusta Township, Superior Township, and Salem Township. You know, it's been a great opportunity and a real honor. And, you know, I am going to be running for re-election next year. We're most of the way through my first term, which has been a very interesting one, given all of the events that I didn't expect to encounter along my way. Yeah, I mean, there are, you know, a number of things I think that those of us who are on this call share in terms of are interested in wanting to further the drug policy reform we've had a lot of success with here in Michigan in recent years, to make sure that some of the changes that we made in 2018 that were so historic are protected, and that we continue to grow on those wins. And also on a wide range of other issues. There are a lot of issues that initially got me involved in politics, like how is it that we're treating our fellow human beings? Are we making sure that people have enough to eat and a roof over their heads, and that they're able to go to a doctor when they need to, or they're able to seek mental health care? What are we doing to educate the next generation and make sure that we protect clean air and clean water? These are issues. These are the things that I think about all the time. And so to be able to work on them professionally is a tremendous honor. And so part of that process of trying to serve as an elected official is to put your name out there, put your name on the ballot, and also to ask other people to support you in that effort. So if folks are able to support me in running for re-election, I'd encourage you to go to irwinforsenate.com and follow the link to donate and help me, because I do need support to get back to Lansing. I do need folks who support the kinds of things that I'm pushing for in Lansing to say to their friends and neighbors in Washtenaw County, you should vote for Jeff Irwin, and to also help me financially if that's something that you're able to do.
Right on. So, and then there's a fundraiser coming up that there's information on just this week. There's information on that on my page, being circulated around social media and stuff like that. So if you're interested in helping out and joining us for a gathering, then that would be a good opportunity too, besides just going to the site and donating. Of course, at any time, feel free to fill us in on whatever you find to be of interest to us and information that we might knowing. But I'm sure you're familiar with the kind of controversy / boycott of Michigan Cannabis Manufacturing Association companies and their attempt to pitch significant law changes that would peel back existing rights and create burdens for caregivers and make it more difficult for small businesses to flourish. And just any thoughts on that, or any insight on that, and then any legislation that's floating around that might have traction that would be of concern or interest to us.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we've talked about before, Jamie. I think one of the things that I've remarked from the stage at Hash Bash, going back to before we were able to be successful with legalization and then extending afterwards. We do need to be vigilant in making sure that we protect this law against changes that are going to be bad for our rights, bad for consumers, or that are going to, allow a narrow group of people to erect a walled garden around their business interest. I mean, we need to create a system where people need to compete fairly for their customers, where people need to provide a good product, just like in any other setting. Right. We know that cannabis is going to be regulated. It's going to be maybe even highly regulated. It's sort of like alcohol, as we said during the campaign. And so there are going to be some rules, and there are going to be some rules out there that will, arguably favor someone over another. But we need to be very careful about each one of those rules to make sure that they're not, once again, creating some sort of unfair competitive advantage. We need to make sure that the interests of the consumers are kept in the forefront. So yeah, that's all true. I think that there are folks who have engaged the legislature and asked for different changes. But I think that each one of those different companies that are parts of different associations, whether it's that one or another one, they all have different opinions and interests as well. And so as a legislator, one of the things that's very interesting to me is being able to hear the different shades of what it is that these companies are interested in. And first and foremost, I think they're just interested in continuing to be able to do business here in the state of Michigan. And that's something, as an advocate of legalization, I don't have a problem with that aspect of their interests. But to your point, like in every other regulated industry, whether it's beer and wine, or whether it's utilities or healthcare or anything else, there are always these ideas that come forward that might be negative for consumers. And one of the ones that I think I've been hearing coming up time and time again, and that I've been trying to sound the alarm about, and many of these opportunities I've had to join you and others on these podcasts is, just efforts to change and increase the tax. Increase is pretty straightforward. There are folks out there who say, look, Michigan's excise tax is only 10%. Maybe it should be 15%. Maybe it should be 20%. Maybe it should be in line with Colorado's. Maybe it should be in line with, some other states. And then there are also folks who want to change the distribution of that tax. And when we designed Proposal 1, there were, I think there was an effort to make the tax allocation straightforward and, in line with something that the voters could understand and support. And so what we did is we split that tax revenue up 35% to K-12 schools, 35% to repair roads and bridges, and 30% to the local governments who house cannabis retail facilities. And so, I think that makes sense to people, and I think we should keep it that way. Certainly in the near term, all of these efforts to, change that distribution and, you take away some of the money from K-12 or take away some of the money from local governments and give it to, often I hear the suggestion is law enforcement, are not efforts that I'm supportive of. I know that the people in my district aren't exactly clamoring for a refund the police effort. That's not what I get in my email inbox. Those are the kinds of things that I hear about most in Lansing, getting the most traction. I do think that, we definitely have heard folks say that going all the way back to before the passage of the MMFLA, we heard folks say, let's ban caregivers. I've never thought that there are votes for that. But one of the things that I've been encouraging, going once again way back to 2016 when we were talking about the MMFLA, was let's of course not ban caregivers. The voters created caregivers in the MMMA, and they need to be protected. And there are a lot of folks out there who have bona fide medical needs and who need to access to that opportunity. But I also think that the legal market would benefit, and the medical marijuana market would benefit from allowing caregivers, if they wanted to get a license and sell their overages into the legal system. Mm-hmm. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think that it would, that might be a way to bridge the gap and really give caregivers who might have a unexpectedly large crop, or who might want to have an expectedly large crop, to be able to count on that outlet into the legal market for that product. That's those are some of my thoughts on some of the various attacks that I've been hearing coming up, and some of the other ideas that at least I've been trying to put out there since 2016, because I just think that in the long run, what's going to be best for all parties involved, and particularly for consumers, is to make the legal market work and make it work well and make it rational from a price and supply standpoint for folks to go through that route. And right now, the way it's set up with some of the, really breathless and over the top rules that we require, it is hard for some of those folks to compete with folks who aren't following those rules.
Excellent. And I appreciate that idea of kind of reincorporating the caregivers into the system. That's small grows in Oklahoma are a thing, and they work out really well. They just have to meet the standards, of the commercial marketplace. And if they do, and they've paid their nominal licensing fee, they can introduce their product to the market. And a lot of caregivers would then provide quality and diversity to this market, and that would be useful right now. So Adam Brook wants to know best way to contact your representative or senator, email, telephone call, in-person visit.
Well, there's a couple different answers to this. And, I guess the first one is just that it depends. I mean, every legislator is a little different. We're all people. Some people respond differently to different approaches. I would also point out that sometimes it also depends on a generational effect, right? So in general, I find that legislators who are maybe older than me tend to respond to phone calls a little more and better, or more quickly, and less so to emails, whereas I think folks who are a little bit younger than me tend to respond more to the emails and less rapidly to the telephone calls. But really, the best of all is in person. And I would encourage everybody to consider going to town halls, or going to coffee hours, or going to other events where their legislators or their other elected officials are going to be, to ask them questions about the issues you care about, whatever that might be. And given the subject of this show, to ask them questions about cannabis laws, and ask them questions about what they think about either the state of the laws we were just talking about a moment ago, or what they think about some of the folks who still are in prison for crimes that were fundamentally about cannabis. What about some of these other drug policy reform issues that are important to at least myself, right? Like, I'm getting ready to introduce a law to decriminalize entheogenic plants. It would be great to get more lawmakers just to get on the record on that issue. Do they think that people ought to go to jail for using those substances or not? And just having those questions asked especially in person in a public setting, I think has a real impact on just encouraging people to reckon with these questions. A lot of the I think problem we have in changing some of these laws, particularly around drug policy reform, is that we're stuck in a certain way here in America. We've got a certain inertia given the war on drugs, and knocking people out of that by getting them to think about what it could look like under a different regime is important. That's an important part of the change process.
Hey, so I'm going to get to a question from Cindy Godfrey in a minute about the definition changes concerning the Delta 8 thing in a second. But before that, we have Josie Scoggin joining us from Sons and Daughters United, and from a new organization, Great Lakes Expungement Network. Now, an awesome set of bills to help out with expungement issues passed in last session. But cannabis kind of got the short end of the stick, if you may agree. And I know that you were working very heavily on trying to get some of the changes in that would make that not the case, and make it a little bit more sensible and along the lines I think a lot of us would have expected. And Josie is heading up a lot of the work in this new organization that helps people out with expungements, Great Lakes Expungement Network. And already we've run into some issues based on the existing laws with trying to help some people out that don't seem to make a lot of sense. In the Michigan Cannabis Freedom Coalition, the policy committee, we are looking at trying to ask people to help with modifying that law to get more to how you were presenting it last session, and other things, possibly some things being automatic, including felonies, more of the activities that would be eligible, for expungement, not having maybe the automatic expungements on some activity would help out, but there's this, period of time that has to pass without any other incidents taking place and things like that. And anyway, Josie, I think, has dealt with this head on. And so I'd like for her to describe, like an issue or some issues that she's seen with this, and just get your response on it. And see if you think there's anything we can do.
I'm so excited to be here with the greats. I'm so happy. And I was just
Josie, I'm excited to see you. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm excited to see you.
Man, I texted Jamie and I was like, why is Jeff Irwin so cool? And then he just kept saying cooler things. I was so excited about it. When we started the Great Lake Expungement Network, it was all about taking full advantage of these great, fantastic clean slate bills, which are 6 different bills, which I think is confusing for a lot of people. They issued the new forms on April 11th or April 9th, and they were to go into effect on April 11th. These forms are making people attest that no crimes have been committed in the time between today's date and the date that they ended their sentencing. So what that means is if you have a brother who has a felony from 92 for growing, and then maybe he drove on a suspended license 2 times, and then maybe he got a DUI in 2014. So in order I'll never be able to expunge anything on this guy's record because
She's so good. I feel like she's still talking. I can hear her in my head. Just go for it, Josie.
Oh.
Well, I'm going to be eager to get the full download on exactly that form and get my hands on it, because it sounds like she had her finger on maybe a way that we could change the form so that they're not holding people back.
Man, I get good. Like I just get passionate about it and they kick me right off. But what we're seeing is people are ineligible for 3 different reasons for the most part. And when we started it, we really didn't know what our goal was, right? Are we looking to expunge people's records, or are we looking to find out if they're eligible and walk them through the process? And so that's 2 very different things when we're talking about how much time we're dealing with clients. And so we decided it's way too hard to find information as it is, and that we want to be at least a one-stop shop to see if you're eligible, to connect you with attorneys, to connect you with free expungement resources. While we were doing this, we've also been collecting the data on people who are not eligible and why they're not eligible. And for 2 reasons. Number one, because we have people like Jeff Irwin on our side who are dedicated to real, substantial change and to bettering the life of Michiganders. And we all know Jeff loves Michigan.
Oh, no.
But we do know Jeff loves Michigan. She's so right about that.
We do. And we can disappoint the point here a little bit too. I mean, you understand there's some issues. She's going to come back on and continue, but there are some issues that might be able to be fixed that are getting in the way. I think ultimately that's her question, but here we go.
Damn. All right. I'm just going straight to the data points now. We're seeing that people are invalidated based on DUIs. First-time DUIs are act as a roadblock, but that would not be a roadblock if this waiting period, this clean record requirement, we allowed people to expunge things that were on their record if there had been 7 years clean period. So I'm agreeing with the fact that they should show that they are rehabilitated or that they're staying out of trouble. But that's not the only requirement. So if you have if you haven't reoffended in 20 years, but your last offense is a DUI or an inexpungible offense, I'll never be able to expunge anything, even if there's something like felony marijuana or marijuana illegal transport. And so when Jamie says that marijuana has gotten the poor end of the stick, it's not necessarily true. They didn't get what we feel they deserve, but all of the expungement bills kind of fell short due to this waiting period, due to this clean record requirement. We have a guy in the UP who is 66 years old. His only offense ever was growing weed in 2013. A lot of weed, but still. And he totally was eligible for expungement, came to me in January. It was like, yeah, we don't know how the laws are going to play out. Let's wait till it forms in April. They hit us with this clean record requirement saying that he cannot have any charges between today's date and the end of his sentencing. But in the middle of the pandemic in 2020, he was driving on without any insurance in his car. So he has to wait 5 years to be eligible for expungement because of this poverty crime. And that's what a lot of people's crimes are, right? They're not, hey, I'm a bad guy.
Poverty crimes really are a real thing, and I know exactly what she's talking about. I know you do too, Jeff.
Yeah, we need to decriminalize poverty, and we know that a lot of times these driving without insurance or driving without license suspended crimes are often just times as a result of someone being unable to pay fines, and then it stacks up. And one of the things I think, though, a lot of people don't know is just to what extent our district courts are funded by fines on poor people.
If you go sit in on a district court day, it's like just a giant cash register.
Right. Hey, Senator Irwin, I'm curious, this waiting period, this clean record period, is that common throughout the entire expungement bill package, or is that something only applied to cannabis abuse?
Well, it is common throughout the entire package, although I think maybe a more accurate way to say it would be that, as was mentioned earlier, there were a handful of different bills. And one of the bills is the clean slate bill. And that's the bill that basically says that if you go for this period of time without a reoffending and your crimes were not violent in the first place and weren't on this prohibited list like DUI and a couple others that maybe shouldn't be on the list. But I mean, nonetheless, that's what it said. If you go this period of time without reoffending, then your record can be cleared. There was a separate bill that dealt specifically with cannabis. And what that bill did is that bill said that if your crime was use or possession, then you were going to be eligible to get that expunged without regard to the number, and that you had to apply, and that your expungement would be granted unless the prosecutor challenged your request and the judge ruled that there was a valid determination that you shouldn't get your expungement for some reason that was articulable by the whole team there. So in general, what that bill said is that if you have a use or possession crime, you're going to get your that expunged. So out of all the people that I could find during my research that were in the state criminal database for cannabis crimes, there were about 235,000 people who had crimes for use or simple possession. There were another, I think, 25,000 people who had crimes on their record for possession with intent to deliver. That was not covered by the specific cannabis-related bill, but it does fall under the previous clean slate bill and is covered by that waiting period. Same with manufacture. And the argument that I attempted to make during the passage of the specific cannabis bill was that, well, look, the idea here that this bill was introduced under and that was passed under in the House was that things that are now legal under Proposal 1 should be expungible. And it is now legal; it's strictly legal to grow. And so, that seems, like a right that has been granted by Proposal 1. It should clearly be included in the sort of more or less automatic version, but it wasn't. And possession with intent to deliver, I mean, I would point out that there are plenty of people right now who are delivering cannabis in Michigan and making a license and are making money off of it and are licensed by the state to do so. And so I think they should have been included as well. But as I think everyone on this call knows, they were not ultimately included.
It was some technical wording that excludes them. It excludes, all the activity. The issue, part of the issue is the fact that without remuneration is allowed if transfers between adults 21 and over 2.5 ounces or less, and that the transactions that took place before were based at a time when there was no discussion of money, whether it was specifically prohibited or not. All they had to do was transfer it, whether or not money exchanged hands, and that was the crime. Now that transfer is legal, so it's an attempt to keep these things down. Like, this is the issue that we have with cannabis at large.
I made that specific argument as well that, look, there are plenty of people who got possession with intent to deliver who actually weren't delivering. There are also plenty of people who got possession with intent to deliver that were delivering without remuneration. But, and none of these arguments were able to win the day in our current conservative legislature. And, what we ended up with, though, is actually, I think, a pretty good result overall for, people in this, particular StreamYard room, which is, that the vast majority of people who have cannabis crimes on their record have, a statutory opportunity to get expungement that is pretty clear, and it's pretty hard for them to not get it. And even those folks who are left out, those 35,000 people or so, I think, as I count them at least, who were left out of that, are going to be eligible for clean slate pretty soon, provided they can stay out of trouble in the meantime. But I appreciate Josie Scoggins' point that there are people who maybe have committed some sort of what we would consider extremely minor, very, very petty crime in the interim, and then that's preventing them from having access to this clean slate opportunity, really in a way that is not in line with public policy, or even the public policy that I think the majority of legislators currently who pass clean slate, would want. I do think that some of those issues, like driving with no insurance and driving with license suspended, are ones that we might be able to get an enhancement to the law to say that those don't count against your clean slate.
So let's talk about this real quick, Jeff. The first sentence of the law that we've all been praising says that for people looking to expunge multiple misdemeanors and felonies, they may do so on one application. So I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that this is also your guys' intention, was that we could file for all things that are eligible for expungement, provided that it's been 7 years maximum since they ended the sentencing for their most recent offense, right? That we could apply for everything at one time. So when we got the forms, and the forms on there make you check a box in order to be eligible that says no other crimes have been committed between today's date and the end of my sentencing. So it prevents us from putting things that happened really any time between there. So I can't just go back to 92 and expunge a felony. If you have one other thing in front of it, I have to expunge that first, or at least that's the guidance we're getting from the Attorney General's office. Is this something that you're seeing? Does the legislature know that this is the way it is?
I certainly am not familiar with the intricacies that you're talking about, and I'd be happy to maybe spend some more time getting sort of like walked through it. If maybe I can be helpful in trying to resolve it, I'd want to talk to the Attorney General's office as well. Yeah, I'd want to talk to our local prosecutors and some of the defense attorneys here in Washington County that have really been in the forefront of making expungement fair opportunities available, and walking people through this very arduous process even before these laws exist that make it easier. So no, it's not something I am currently familiar with, and I know what the law says broadly, but when you started initially talking about the forms, Josie, I was thinking, oh, I need to get my hand on this form, right? So you look at what it is exactly you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's something we're looking for and me and Jamie keep talking about, is that there's no way that this was the intent of the law. But B, that this was something that people knew was going to happen, right? When we were promoting the clean slate bills, when we were talking about this idea of a clean slate, and it can happen. People can have like 6, 8, 10 things on their record and get them all expunged and be eligible for that. But they have to do it in layers in a way that it requires a new application fee and a new court date, and also new fingerprints and new copies and a variety of issues. And we're so lucky to have places like Washtenaw County who are doing above and beyond. I mean, they just had an expungement fair where they had food and games, and it wasn't an expungement fair, or was it a carnival? I don't really know, but it was awesome. And that's not something I see out here in rural Michigan. I'm back out here in Niles, Buchanan, Benton Harbor area. And the expungement, the access to tools like that just isn't there. And it is shameful for us as a state to promote these as something we can do on our own. When I have 9 different attorneys on our team who don't agree with any of it, with each other. And so I think that I'm really looking forward to seeing you introduce something that solves what is, I think, a very basic issue. But the only other thing that people are really getting hung up on is getting charged with this. You can't expunge the same felony twice if it's punishable by more than 10 years, which seems pretty reasonable unless you look at the drug sentencing guidelines for the state of Michigan, which says that everything except for cannabis is punishable by up to 20 years. And so we're looking at things like if you have, let's say that your daughter gets involved in methamphetamine, which is a very big issue in rural Michigan, especially here in Cass County, and they don't ever hit you with one charge, and I know I don't have to tell you that, but let's say that she gets charged with possession of methamphetamine twice. She will never, under the current statute, be able to expunge the other charge, even if it's been 20, 30, 40 years. And so when we're looking at redemption, and the idea in Michigan is a lot like all of America, where we're rooting for the underdog. I mean, hell, we all have a Lions t-shirt in our closet, right? There's no shortage of redemption stories here in the state of Michigan, and I believe that if there's anyone that supports the idea of a second chance, I know that it's Jeff Irwin. And so I'm so glad to have you on here. And Jeff, I also wanted to say, I know that you're from a pretty conservative part of northern Michigan, right? Your dad was a legislator for a long time. He is a legend out there. What does he think about all of this progressive work that you've done?
Yeah, so a few things. One, I am originally from Sault Ste. Marie, and Sault Ste. Marie and the eastern Upper Peninsula is it's a very socially conservative area. In many ways, it's kind of the opposite politically than a lot of my neighbors here in Washtenaw County, where Washtenaw County tends to be very socially liberal and maybe a little fiscally conservative. The Upper Peninsula is almost really kind of the opposite, socially conservative and fiscally. They like the jobs at the college or the prison or what have you, DNR, etc. So it was definitely a different sort of environment to come to here in Washtenaw County than what I grew up in. As far as what does he think of all this? It's interesting because you would think that given the way that the political spectrum has shifted so far to the right in this country, that that he might be somehow appalled by what it is I do, but I don't think so. I think partially because I'm a son, but also partially because, like I said, the fulcrum of politics in America has moved so far to the right that even people who were kind of moderate or conservative Dems back then are clearly Democrats now. And so, I mean, think about it. Think about some of the things that Richard Nixon was pushing around universal health care, Medicare. He signed Medicare. He created the EPA. The things that now seem that the right messages as being left-wing conspiracies like clean air and clean water and quality education and making sure everyone has access to healthcare. Those things were bipartisan ideals a couple generations ago, 30, 40 years ago. So I don't know, there's no issue there. But one thing I would say, to go back to the meat of the discussion, is that Josie, you living in those areas, I'm sorry you don't have access to these resources, but one thing you do have access to is you do have access to the legislators themselves who really I need as partners to be able to get some of these things done. And so, I would be more than happy to work with you on the details of maybe what we could do to tweak the law to make it work better and to make it work more smoothly. I think that is one of the things that we can get conservative Republican legislators to care about. Both as a path to redemption and both because, also because of its benefit to the economy, but also because of the fact that, sometimes there are things in government that aren't left or right, they're just up or down. And when it comes to paperwork and making things more difficult for people in ways that aren't really necessary and that maybe also cause our employees in government to have to spend more time dealing with it in ways that aren't necessary, oftentimes those are the kinds of things where you can get folks to come together on it, as long as you can get folks on both sides of the aisle to see it. And you're in a position to help me get my colleagues to see it. So let's work together on what some of the details are and what we need to fix, and see if we can't get a bipartisan team working on making change.
Hey, Jeff, do you think that some of those changes could include making like the simple use and possession automatic?
Well, it could, but I would point out to you, one of the things I guess I haven't been super clear about here is that we're kind of mixing terms, and I don't want to be sort of like pedantic about it, because maybe I don't even know what all these different terms mean, but we've been throwing around these different terms. One of the ones is clean slate. A lot of times the word clean slate or the term clean slate was used to refer to the whole package, but sometimes clean slate was, as I said a minute ago, kind of really just that one bill. And that one bill, the clean slate bill, is automatic. The problem is that that's not going to kick in until probably 2 years after the effective date. So probably April of 2023. It could come earlier than that, but essentially we've now deployed the funding to hire the programmers, to design the database system that's going to key into both the statewide criminal record database, but also all 83 counties plus all the district courts. So it's a sizable technology project, and that aspect of it is going to be automatic. So eventually those older possession and those older use charges are going to be eventually automatically taken off people's records, but that's going to take some time. And in the meantime, folks are stuck with the application process.
And before people call me telling me that they're going to get their records expunged automatically, which they totally will, I do want to talk about that for a minute. You can expunge stuff automatically starting in 2023 if you have no more than 2 felonies or 3 misdemeanors. Which Jeff might be right, and he is usually right. So about that not including marijuana misdemeanors. You can expunge as many marijuana misdemeanors as you want. And it also includes sale of paraphernalia and paraphernalia as well when we're talking about marijuana misdemeanors. And so if you know anybody that was involved in any of that stuff, we're still happy to do that. Jeff, what do you think about in terms of automatic expungements when you were talking? Was that something that you found had a lot of support in the legislature?
Well, that was one of the really tough things to get over the hill, really. There were that was one of the things that there was the most pushback about. This concept that some of these crimes would be eliminated from someone's record without a specific review. I certainly supported that because there are just so many folks who are swept into, particularly when we start talking about that driving without insurance piece. You got hundreds of thousands of records on that, right? And so those things really, it didn't benefit the public to have someone review each one of those and to have a judge sign off and to have someone file paperwork on every single one of those. And that's true of a lot of other crimes as well that I saw as just extremely petty. So that was actually the possibly the most controversial element of the whole package. Was there were a number of individual, certainly individual prosecutors, individual sheriffs, and I believe even their associations who at the beginning at least were dead set against that. I'm sort of hedging on that because I don't remember how they came out in the end, because there was a tremendous amount of back and forth and negotiation about the details on these bills, which is partly how they ended up. They could have been a lot better, but I do think that the progress that we got was meaningful and was worth getting, and it's going to help a lot of folks who were caught up in particularly our bad cannabis laws. And the vast majority of them are certainly eligible in the short term to get their records cleared by application, and over the long run, a lot of folks are going to get it automatically. But as Josie points out, there is a not insignificant number of people who this isn't going to help, or whom automatic isn't going to work for. Probably some of us on this call know a number of those folks because of our involvement in the movement for reform. And it's particularly frustrating when you've got individuals who, stuck out their necks to point out how terrible these laws were and to become sort of a living example of why cannabis prohibition was ignorant. Some of those folks are not going to be able to get relief from these laws, and that's particularly frustrating.
Appreciate that. So, Josie, anything else you want to add? Because we are going longer than I thought we were going to, and I really appreciate your time here, Jeff. Are you okay for a couple more minutes?
I was going to try to get out of here pretty soon, Jamie, but I can stick with you for a couple minutes. One thing I'll mention just to tee it up for you is while I've got the floor, and one of the other things I would encourage folks to consider communicating with their legislators about is, what we're doing with the state budget, how we're spending some of our money on some of these issues. We have an opportunity here in Michigan to take a different direction with drug policy across the board. And one of the issues I feel that we could get some bipartisan action on is to move more towards harm reduction as a public health approach to substance abuse. We know that there are folks out there who get caught into the vortex of addiction and who need help, and yet our state continues to, I feel, misinvest our dollars in approaches that are less likely to work, less likely to reach the people who need help, less likely to build trust with the individuals who need someone, to build trust with. So, reaching out to your legislators and encouraging them to, do more with medically assisted treatment, to do more with methadone clinics, to do, more with, approaches to addiction that are likely to work, rather than the approach we take now, which is, badges and guns and it's not effective.
Senator, if we were to adjust the law in order to publicly fund the district court so that they didn't make revenue from the fines and fees that you talked about earlier in this program. I mean, again, we're talking about penalizing people with poverty disproportionately from penalties that, weighed upon people with wealth. So if we wanted to take that up as a public funding thing and not rely on that source, what would that look like as far as the dollar amount goes? Any idea?
I am somewhat reluctant to throw out a number because I worry I'm going to get it horribly wrong. But I do know that just in the circuit court, so so getting out of the district court realm for a second, in the circuit court, in order to replace the amount of money that is put in by fees, it would be about $200 million statewide. And so at the circuit court level, you're assigned both fines that are statutory, and then you're also assigned fees, which are, we'll call them extra statutory. I actually think that they should not be charged. I don't think that they're authorized by the law. But anyway, this has been a fight for many years in the legislature, and the courts have weighed in without going into all the nitty gritty for all the circuit courts in the state to replace the fees would be about $200 million. I suppose that the number for the district courts would be considerably larger than that. And so I don't want to hazard a guess, but I think that the jail and pretrial task force might have looked into this issue, or maybe it was there was a recent task force on court funding that I know was looking into these issues as well. So I need to go reacquaint myself with those numbers. But it's a big number. I suggest it's probably a small billion, like maybe 1 or 1.2, be my guess. Wow.
Hey,
I said I wasn't going to guess, and then I did.
Okay. So before you go, and not to beleaguer, let me just get right to the heart of a question. There is going to be some amendments that have to do with changing definitions of marijuana, which has to do with like housing the Delta 8 cannabinoid and its sale and all that kind of stuff under the MRTMA, ultimately. And is there any concern for further restrictions, burdens, anything like that as a result of this? Anything to be concerned about?
Right. There's always a certain level of concern, and I want to make sure we get it right. And so if folks have specific concerns about some of the definitions in there and how, they may be, inappropriate in some way or may lead to unintended consequences, I certainly would love to hear that. I haven't heard that yet. I've looked at the legislation myself. None of that popped out at me. But, certainly eager to hear from folks, if they've got concerns of that nature. I would say that, if folks are going to be, burning and inhaling a substance that is publicly for sale, I think there has to be some, appropriate level of public health protection and, therefore regulation thereof. But I want to make sure we get it right. And I'm eager to hear from folks if they think that the House has gotten it wrong, either in a very narrow way or in some broader sense. But I haven't been hearing that thus far.
So Adam's asking about the penalty for violating this law, this change. And the reality is it's getting housed under the MRTMA, so it follows. Digital audio in. It then follows those consequences as they would come under that statute. Is that right? So
as I understand it, that's right. And so therefore, if you were, caught with it, it starts out as, a non-jailable misdemeanor, I think, at the most. I think in order to get beyond that, you have to be, willfully and habitually, commercially selling it. And so, I think that if I understand it correctly, and we're going to kick the tires at this as the bill goes through the Senate, what it would mean is that, it's essentially like marijuana. And so, it's something that if you do, continue to sell it without a license, and they can prove that you're done so habitually and willfully and knowingly violating the law, then eventually you can go to jail for it. But otherwise, it's a non-jailable misdemeanor.
So, and then some people may like it or not like it or be concerned about opening of the act, even though it's just specific to that one section or anything like that. But it does not create further restrictions, and existing further restrictions that we need to look at or be concerned about. Is that correct?
I mean, I don't see those yet. I mean, so, I think that given some of the limitations of MRTMA, all of that sort of comes to bear, right? I mean, so, for instance, when we proposed and passed Proposal 1, it made cannabis broadly legal for adults 21 and over, but not for people 18 to 21, not for people under 18. And so some of those limitations come to bear. But no, I nothing's popped out at me yet. We haven't had the benefit of the committee and the opportunity to vote on it. But I've read the legislation. I saw the vote in the House. I've read it specifically with that idea of thinking like, do any of these definitions create problems in other ways? And it's not immediately apparent to me, but there is some language in there about how to define, like I think it's all isomers or something like that. That's pretty broad. But then again, I don't see a scenario in which that would be broad in a way that's inappropriate. So, but if folks feel otherwise, I'm always interested to learn more and to look at it from new angles.
Senator, two things that are really big in other states and are coming to the Michigan would be, THC driving limitations that's been tried before. I'm wondering if there's a renewed effort to try and get that going this year. And secondly would be to change the tax structure based on THC content. We've seen in other states where higher THC products would carry a higher tax level. Are we hearing any kind of rumors about those things in Lansing yet?
I haven't heard that second one. That would be a new one. If it is being bounced around, I haven't heard it. The first one, trying to create some sort of strict per se intoxication limit in Michigan, such that if you tested above a certain nanogram limit on some test, then therefore you were intoxicated and therefore driving illegally. That idea continues to come up, and I suspect it will continue to come up. Right now, I think that from what I can tell in the legislature, the science is holding that legislation back. What I mean by that, and I think everybody on this call knows that, is that the science just does not support the idea that someone with a particular nanogram reading on these tests is intoxicated. There are people who are intoxicated at that level, and there are people who are not. And so it's just not reliably connected. These numbers are not reliably connected to people's impairment. And so as a result, I think that these kinds of bills, which continue to come up like a bad penny, have been beaten back in Michigan. I think many of you may know there was a report done by the Michigan State Police on this very issue, and their report said something very similar to what I just said. And so I think so far that's been holding these kinds of ideas back, but these ideas are enacted into law in other states, and I don't know, because I'm not maybe connected enough to people in, say, Colorado, but I don't know if these laws are starting to create big problems for people who are habitual users. But I know that, for instance, when we were looking at these issues back when we were dealing with a medical law here in Michigan, and we didn't have an adult use law yet, there were some studies that I looked at that showed that people who were regular medical users were walking around at all times with more than 5 nanograms, even if they hadn't used recently. And so
guilty.
I don't think any of us would survive that standard, and we might be stone cold sober too. So, is there anything you'd like to leave us with, Jeff? Definitely, acknowledge or point to where people could donate again, before you leave. But any message or anything else you'd like to make sure you get in before we wrap this up?
Yeah, sure. Appreciate the opportunity for the plug. Anybody who wants to support can go to irwinforsenate.com and follow the link to donate there. I guess I would just say what I often say, and when I end these conversations with many of my friends who are on this call in drug policy reform, which is, please keep building relationships with your lawmakers. Build relationships to the extent you can with your city council members and your mayors. Build relationships with your prosecutors or your judges. Make sure that they know who you are and what it is you want them to do. I think earlier someone brought up the idea of asking questions about municipal approvals, and that's an important question. Why is it that so many communities in Michigan are saying no to allowing cannabis businesses in their vicinities? Part of it is because the people who are on these city councils, the people who are on these township boards, they tend to be a little older. They tend to be a little more conservative, and maybe they're not hearing from their residents who would like to shop in their area, or who would like to open a business in their area, who would like to employ people in their area, who would like to contribute to the tax base of their area, who maybe are sick of driving to the neighboring community and spending their dollars there and contributing to the tax base in that community. They need to hear that. If they never hear that from anyone, if they never hear from a customer or a prospective business owner in their area, then it's not likely that they're going to change their mind. So, I just would encourage folks to reach out to their decision makers, let them know what you think. And if they don't agree with you, I think it's best to just, continue to respectfully build that relationship and ask those questions. And you'd be surprised. I mean, I've seen a lot of folks, particularly on this issue of cannabis law reform, change their stance over the course of the last 10 or 20 years. A lot of folks who were hardened opponents, come around to the idea over time. Sometimes it's because someone close to them, experiences an illness and finds relief from cannabis. Sometimes it's because they actually see that legalization isn't causing problems in their neighboring community. Sometimes it's that they see their neighboring community getting hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue from their legal and licensed cannabis retail facilities. Sometimes it's they realize that busting people for this is a huge mistake. However they get there, it doesn't matter, but they'll get there more easily if you ask them to get there and you build a relationship with them and you let them know what you think and why.
Right on. Well, with that, I appreciate it, and we're going to help to see you through the next term, 2022. You know what? I'm sorry. I know you're going to go, but like in terms of what 2022 means with the redistricting and stuff like that, more favorable or less favorable to get a significantly different composition, a better composition of lawmakers in Lansing for this issue, for example?
Yeah, well, I will say that it's always hard to say how these things will come out, but I think that it is hard to imagine a scenario where the maps will not produce a more democratic and likely more progressive legislature, which means in general for cannabis law reform issues, that's good. And I think, as all of you who've been watching these issues for a long time know, there have been Republican and conservative champions on these issues. Not all Democrats are good on these issues, but in general, Democrats having gavels in their hands and being in leadership positions and having more members in the chamber is going to be good for these issues. And the reason why I say it's only going to get more progressive in the next cycle is because these maps that we're existing on now and they're drawn specifically to benefit the Republicans. I mean, they had the benefit of great data, great computers, and they were able to draw the maps just so to try to exact maximum advantage. And these new maps, even if they are not drawn in a way to advance Democrats, I don't think they're going to be drawn in a way where they really strain to find ways to benefit the Republican Party like the current maps are. And so we won't know for many months how much better they are, but I don't see a scenario in which they don't get at least a little better.
One more question from Jenny, and then we'll wrap it up.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. I just wanted to know, Mr. Irwin, if you were familiar with what's going on in our local municipalities when it comes to caregivers, not recreational establishments or business, but essentially municipalities right now are passing ordinances that ban or restrict caregivers to the point where they couldn't even have a 72 plant grow for their patients. And this is happening everywhere. I have been fighting Flushing Township since February. And now just last night, I was on a Zoom meeting with the trustees of Clinton Township, and they are going to pass one. I mean, they're actually trying to say that you would have 55 square feet to grow and dry your product. I mean, that wouldn't even be enough for one person. And basically what they're doing is they're stomping all over the MMMA And I would just like to know if there is anything we can do about it. If you can let other, legislators know what's going on, because this should not be happening. They are completely hindering a patient's access to their medication, to an affordable medication. They are doing this by trying to call a caregiver a home occupation, a business, and they're not. They can only have up to 6 people they can grow for, obviously, including themselves, 72 plants. I mean, that's not a business. They can't even pay taxes. So my question is, what can we do?
Right, Jeff, and you know about the DeRuyter and leaving open what's reasonable. Okay, so that's what's going on.
Yep, no, I get it, and this is a big conversation, and I'd be happy to have it in a more thorough way at another time, because I actually am getting to my limit here. However, I will say a few things about it. One, I agree with you. It seems to me like these ordinances violate the MMMA. I don't know how they're getting away with them. Then again, the DeRuyter decision seemed to me to be out of line with the MMMA. And when I read it, I'm not remembering all the facts because it was a while ago now, but it seemed to me that maybe this was a case where bad facts make bad law. And, part of the problem here is that we haven't had the benefit of a case go up to the state Supreme Court or the state Court of Appeals where the caregiver, had a very sort of compelling set of facts to be able to argue this point, that these ordinances are contrary to the MMMA, which they shouldn't be allowed to operate in such a way. So I think that's part of it. Educating lawmakers, could be part of it. But of course, the law already says a number of things that are the MMMA, which the legislators can't amend except for with a 3/4 majority, already says a number of things that seem to be directly in conflict with these ordinances. I think that what complicates this fact is that there are a lot of people who are operating under the caregiver law who are running operations that are hard to distinguish from a home-based business. And that draws, a lot of attention, that draws a lot of complaints, that draws a lot of impetus for these local officials to feel like, well, they got to do something. And so they pass these ordinances, which once again, I would agree with you, are contrary to, the state law. But some of that has to go through the courts. We need to get some rulings that, demonstrate that there's a limit to how far these ordinances can go. And I'd want to reread DeRuyter to sort of give myself a little bit more of a ledge to push off of here. But I think that if I remember correctly, DeRuyter didn't authorize all of these different things, right? It just You're kind correct. Of broadly opened the door for it. And so, like, for instance, just to get into the detail for one moment before I run away quickly, is that, like, in the MMMA, I believe it's very clear in saying that you can't allow anyone else to have access to your grow. And, people have gone to jail over that issue, right? And now all of a sudden, local ordinances can mandate that you give access to your grow, even though state law prevents it, and I can go to jail if I violate that state law. It doesn't seem right. So anyway, big conversation, important issue. I'd love to have a more helpful answer than I do, but I think this has to be fought out because I just think these local units are overstepping the law.
Municipal League and Township Association.
Yeah, yep. Thank you, Senator.
Municipal League and Township Association helping to kind of push the envelope. This seems to be kind of a pattern too with those guys on this issue. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. A lot of people are saying that after your next term, we should be thinking about the next step and running
Governor. The next step is just to do a great job, tomorrow, and keep trying to be good to our neighbors and serve our families and our communities the best we can. So I appreciate you guys having me on, and all the efforts that so many of you have put into making this change that we've seen here in Michigan that we've enjoyed for the last couple of years. It's one of the reasons why I'm so happy to come on here and spend so much time with all of you, is because I miss a lot of you from going back several years ago when a lot of us were really at the point of the spear on making change here in Michigan that a lot of people are benefiting from. And so there'll continue to be problems to solve, there'll continue to be issues to be resolved, but it is great to see so many folks who were a part of that struggle to make these the problems we're focusing on, rather than achieving that first basic victory of legalization.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you for so much time, and we will definitely have you back on soon. Thank you.
Yep, what a great segment with a great guy, Senator Irwin. We've known him since he was Rep. Irwin. Jim Salame, I think he's your senator, isn't that correct, sir?
He was my rep. He's my senator. He's been the hero, the champion. We've been saying that for a decade now for the cannabis movement.
Just gave us an hour.
Yeah,
time. A lot of great content.
Yeah,
he's let people know what he's about.
Generous, and he's helping the entheogen movement too with Decrim Nature Michigan and writing bills for that. So, gosh, man, the guy's amazing.
Yeah,
but let's continue forward with Jenny's conversation.
Right, I'm glad that you asked him that before we end it, because now we've talked about that and we can kind of transition right into that. And Rick, yeah, go ahead.
Well, one thing let's make sure we understand. For a long time, local communities could not do what they're doing right now. They couldn't touch caregivers in ordinance law. It was pretty well established as court cases. Then a different court case happened. Now they feel emboldened to do it. The solution to the problem that was created by the courts lies within the courts itself. We're not able to have a piece of law that's passed that says communities, you shouldn't be doing this. We already have, as the senator pointed out, we already have law that says they shouldn't be doing this. So the only way for us to resolve this is to take one of those best case scenarios, one of those cases where there's a caregiver who's clearly compromised by an ordinance, who's actually been ticketed or penalized by that ordinance, and who clearly has medical connections to patients. And we run that case all the way up to the Supreme Court. And that's how we win this. But that's a really long pathway. I mean, those people are hard to find, and we don't want to wait. And I just don't know if there's a faster solution. I don't know if anyone has ideas to this, but really, as Jenny mentioned, community after community in Michigan is really restricting caregiver growing rights. And until we get a court decision favorable to our position, they're going to continue to do it.
Yeah, I think with stuff like that, you have to really get social media involved and local news. I really, you have to start to picket and do whatever you can to make a point that this isn't something that should be, let to happen. So,
yeah. Jenny, you've had experience with a couple of different communities, and you notice some commonalities in some of the things that they say. Isn't that true?
Yeah, they both seem to complain about the smell. They say that they get all these phone calls from residents.
Keep going, John.
Oh, sorry. They keep getting calls from residents that say, everything just, smells. We don't like the smell of it. And so Clinton Township last night, that was their biggest reason for wanting to do this. They actually said that, they just get so many complaints about smell that they have to do something. And I just think it is so absurd that they would put some aesthetics like, the possibility of some people not liking the smell of cannabis over the medicinal needs of others. That to me is just shameful. And
Jen, if you're talking about we have to do something, couldn't that be disseminating information to people at large to know that, hey, while you're doing these grows for your patients, put in a cheap and easy ventilation system, and they don't have to, restrict what people can do over this. They can do other things that are proactive.
Absolutely. And then they kept mentioning that, these caregivers were selling to kids and that, kids are taking this to school. And I just,
without providing examples, I assume.
I just don't, obviously they don't need a ordinance to stop that. That's just already technically illegal. So,
but also they were not providing any examples. They were just creating this fear in the air, I would imagine.
Yeah, somebody asked, they would like to see the record of all the calls that they're getting. How many are there? But they are sending it to planning. So they have an ordinance up on their township website in a PDF. I took some screenshots of the whole thing and sent it to Jamie, but in there it says something to the effect that if you are growing for yourself, it's like 45 square feet max. And if you're growing for patients, it was 55 square feet max. I don't know. I just don't know what they're thinking. They said they had a lot of research done to come up with that number. And I'm really curious as to who did that research.
Well, we talked about today the Michigan Municipal League and the Michigan Townships Association, and what those two groups do is they advise cities on best ways to save money, to work together in order to combine services, and to find federal grants. There's lots of great purposes that they serve, but as Adam Brook observed in the chat earlier today, fuck the MML, because oftentimes the Michigan Municipal League and the Michigan Townships Association tell communities to do things about cannabis that just don't seem to jive with what the state law is. And remember that the 2008 voter-directed initiative, that overrules all other laws, including the Michigan Home Rule Cities Act, including any ordinances. When there's ever a conflict between the 2008 Act and a local law, the 2008 Act automatically wins because it's a voter-directed initiative. So we really do need a case to get in there. It's just ridiculous.
And it should be pointed out that many of the places that have these conditions where they expect caregivers to like sign up on a list or something like that, or make themselves known to the city, don't actually expect them to show up to do it, and aren't typically known to enforce stuff around it.
We call them pass and pretend laws. They will throw something up on the books because they believe their constituency wants it, and then they know that they're never going to be able to enforce it. It's not legal. And if they did, they'd have a hard time making it work. So consistently, we see things like this done on local level. But when you create such a negative response to your community, like Flint Township did, Jen. Flint Township really was in the media quite a bit for being hard on caregivers. They were in M Live. You arranged for some television media coverage too. It was really a big negative. I'm afraid we lost Jen. But the fact is, it really does draw a bad image down upon these communities. Jim Salim said, social media campaigns, whenever something oppressive towards caregivers is required. I think he's right.
Yeah, he left the room. He's so intensified by this.
I know. He's righteous. He's probably just going to preach to the masses because that's what he does.
And meanwhile, Jen has joined us again, so we don't have to worry about Jim's absence.
Yeah, no. So, Jen, Flint Township, they really got a lot of negative press about this. M Live, the television stations too. They really took a lot of beating, and they're still sticking to their guns, right?
Yeah, they've came out for Flushing, and every time I call them, they tend to come out. But I got disconnected there for a second. So what were you saying about Flint Township?
I'm sorry, I misspoke. I meant to say Flushing Township and said Flint Township, so that's my bad.
Oh, well, basically in Flushing, Buddy Dalton and myself, we've just been raising a lot of noise. We both live here, and so we've been doing everything we can, and we've come a long way. And I feel like Flushing right now is kind of a good example for bridging the gap between the caregiver and the residents and the municipality, because they did listen to us, and we've had a lot of wins on it. We got rid of the acreage requirement, we got rid of the AMP, and now there's the special use land permit that requires an in-person meeting with the planning committee and notifying your neighbors within 300 feet. That is likely to be taken out of there and moved under the type 1, which is still to go into the township, just to simply register as a home occupation, and all your information gets kept on private record. So, I mean, obviously I'm not really for that, but if I had to choose between that and having a caregiver go and put a target on their back by exposing where they live and what they're going to be doing inside their house, I would rather go with the first option.
Right. So talk about the acreage requirement, because what they originally asked for was just outrageous. Tell people what Flushing Township originally thought was a good idea to regulate caregivers with.
Well, they thought it would be fantastic if every caregiver had to own 5 acres of land and live there. And so Flushing property is quite expensive. It's not somewhere that you could just move into and get a house. You wouldn't want to. It's very expensive. But they said that you would have to own 5 acres and live on the residence in order to grow marijuana inside your house. This isn't even about growing outside. This is inside. So even on that 5 acres, you wouldn't be able to put your plants in the ground.
Just to be exclusionary, not even trying to pretend like, oh, I got a bunch of calls about people don't like the smell. So they're just going out of their way to be exclusionary.
Well, they did tell me in the very beginning that they had several nice 5-acre properties for sale.
You know, the next time we go to a township meeting, though, the next time we go to speak to those people, you should bring Baby Yoda with you, because I see Baby Yoda over there, and who can deny that?
I have a couple of them.
That face. Come on. It's like, oh, yes. Baby Yoda is the cutest. So, yep.
All right, so
it's in cannabis law reform, Baby Yoda.
So, Jen, besides Clinton Township, there are so the 5 acre thing, of course, was stupid. Then they whittled that down
to 2 acres.
To 2 acres, and now you got that down. So it's essentially like, as we discussed before, there's an ordinance still there, and there are things in it and some changes, but there doesn't appear to be anything that, given the bigger scheme of things, would really present much of a problem, and that they really, although they might be hell bent on it, they're really left with no great reason to look at doing an ordinance on this issue. After all the other groups,
do one, they're going to put something on the books. But I feel like from all these ordinances that have passed, this one looks so much better. It actually looks like a document that the community helped write, that the community had input on. And I just hope that other municipalities, you know, if they are hell-bent on making an ordinance, that's still going to likely be unenforceable, at least till some of these cases come out of court. That please work with your residents and listen to the people who this affects and the patients that you're taking away their access to their medication from. You know, listen to these people. Don't just make an ordinance because you hire a company. They write terrible language. They know nothing about the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act, the law, what it says in it. They just write things that pertain to zoning. So, you know, listen to your residents and take us seriously.
One of the things that maybe listeners on Pandora or Alexa or our Roku streaming channel on Pro Cannabis Media, maybe they don't appreciate, in Michigan, if you have a pediatric patient, a child who needs cannabis in order to halt their seizures or to keep themselves alive, that has to be provided to them by their parents who are caregivers. And most caregiver parents prepare or provide cannabis for their child one way or another. And that often includes growing the specific strains that their child needs that are specifically effective for their illness. And when you restrict the parent of a sick child into how much medicine they can actually make and give to their kid, there's no way you can justify that by the smell of a garden or because maybe a couple of cars come to the parking to the house during the middle of the day. There's just no justification for taking away the growing rights when a parent is providing for a sick child. And oftentimes, the people that are pushing these changes, Jenny, you can back me up on this, people pushing these changes don't have any idea who the caregivers are and how much they're going to affect their lives, do they?
No. And, you know, I don't think that they really care. They think that they're drug houses, that they're just drug dealers. They're just making all this money and the municipality isn't getting any piece of it. So they're just so mad. And so they feel like they need to take it out on the caregiver. In Flushing Township, they used an example of a guy that, you know, was getting robbed. His plants were getting cut down. And there was like a gunshot warning. And so that was just so terrible that now they have to make this ordinance. And so they're just victimizing the victims because he's a victim of theft. I mean, somebody can steal your car in your driveway or anything on your property. It's the exact marijuana, exact same thing, only that is medicine. So somebody comes and chops down somebody's medicine, you know, that should be a huge crime. But instead they're, you know, making ordinances against the grower. And it just doesn't make any sense. Clinton Township actually said last night that they would be happy if all the caregivers just moved out and so they could bust them all up and they could all move. There's a councilman in Warren And he actually said that he's written the DEA to come and ask them to bust up all the caregivers. And so it's like these people actually want to take away, people's rights and then their access to medication. And I just don't know anybody who would vote for these people. Like, why? They don't represent anyone's interests, left or right, because state rights are bipartisan. Everybody wants their state rights, and the municipality has no right to trample on them. They don't represent the people.
Brandy Zink in the chat, leader of the Michigan ASA chapter, has posted a link that I hope everyone can see, that it's to some support information available from Americans for Safe Access. The truth is, although as frustrating as it is, it's not the first time we've done this, or it's not the first time America's gone through these things too. And there are resources people can use to help them talk to their local communities, fact sheets they can print out to hand out to their local councilmen. National Normal provides some of these. ASA provides some of these too. There's a lot of ways we can get the message out and deliver it directly to those decision makers, because oftentimes they are hearing from just a small minority of people. I know Deb's done speaking to communities for, I guess she's not here right now, but Deb's spoken to communities for years and years and years. Colin, Jamie, Jim, we've all done it. Oftentimes you get a couple of receptive council members, and then there's one very dominant hater, and it really makes it impossible to get things done.
These people in Clinton last night weren't ready for outsiders to show up. The guy was like, why are there outsiders here? Oh, again, you don't live here. Okay, why are you here? And it's just, people don't, these lawmakers just don't understand that what they're doing affects their neighboring communities. It affects people that might be a caregiver in one community and has a patient in another community. They just don't understand how any of this affects one another, how it's connected. And I think if more people start showing up to these meetings and being a part of them, they're gonna learn real quick.
And they conveniently say stuff like,
I'm getting PTSD from Jamie's cam right now. I'm hearing the cops zooming past on Woodward Avenue. It's freaking me out.
Well, that comes to the territory. I don't even hear it anymore. I would mute it if I thought about it. And I guess we did lose Deb. I thought maybe I thought it was one of these things like Jim, where we just saw her chair there. But she dropped out for a second. So maybe we'll see her later on. Maybe not. But anyway, Jen, so you're familiar with like other townships and around the area. I think Atlas is one of them. Somebody's asking in the
Vienna.
Yeah, somebody's asking in the comments about Vienna and what's going on there and what kind of help might be possible for that place.
In Vienna Township, I think that one should be one that potentially could be on the list of, hopefully, let's get that one challenged. They want special land use permit just to grow inside your house. So that does mean you would have to go before planning. You would have to tell them who you are, where you live, and what your intention is with your grow. And you'd also have to notify all of your neighbors within 300 feet. And that, again, is just to grow inside. Then they have another 12 pages that tells you what you can and can't do. It's just absolutely horrible. It's very restrictive. It's just really bad. Theirs already passed. It passed when nobody knew about it. It was going on around COVID time, maybe a little bit before COVID. And nobody knew about it. Just like nobody knew about Flushings. Most people don't know about Clintons. Any place that these passed, nobody knows about it. But it got passed. There was no opposition to it because, again, nobody knew about it. And so now it's just on the books. And if you don't sign up and go before their planning committee and beg for your little permit to grow inside your house and put all your information out there, then you can't grow. So they still have the option to deny you. And there's only been maybe one person that's tried to get permission, and they posted up his medical marijuana license on the internet with his name and his address. And he did not get permission to grow inside.
Wait a second. He was supposed to register with what, the police or with the city? Like the clerk?
Yeah, like the township office.
And then they're the ones that put that up online?
Well, see, this was just from the meeting, the planning hearing.
Because
So
it became public record because he submitted it with a application or something like
right.
that.
And he's trying to get his meeting for the planning commission to ask for permission to have a special land use to grow marijuana inside his house. And I guess he might have been one of the bad neighbors from what I hear. I wasn't there, but some people
Even though he willingly offered up that information,
You can't share that publicly.
that was
Right.
necessary. Yeah, that was. He found that to be
Probably
necessary.
I think he got in trouble before and like cited or something, maybe. And so he was like, okay, well, here's I'm trying to apply.
Right. He thought it was necessary to be able to operate in good conscience based on the local law.
And
so he gave that information.
And he, the word on the street is he probably ran home and chopped all his plants down, And so, like, this is what ordinances are doing to people. And it's just so wrong because these are people's rights. And, even though the DeRuyter's decision isn't clear really about anything, it does say that you cannot ban a caregiver, you cannot penalize a caregiver, and you cannot impose unreasonable restrictions on a caregiver. So if you do not issue that permit, then to me, that's banning the caregiver. So they are all so ready to make this ordinance over this DeRuyter case, but they all skip the 3 points that they also said you cannot do. And they just simply do it.
Some of it's pushing that definition of what's reasonable. Some of this is just flat out in violation, more restrictive than state law.
And who decides what's reasonable? Not you and I. The courts decide what's
Another
reasonable.
case is going to have to probably make its way up. The attorney general could issue an opinion. That's not likely. So, you know what? We are running low on time. Jen, anything coming up that people should know about? We'll have future meetings.
Yes. So July 8th at 7 p.m. in Flushing Township at the township office is going to be draft 1, reading 1 of the ordinance because draft 4 got scrapped. And it's going to be a good time for people to come out and use their 3 to 6 minutes to talk about changes that you still would like to see. They aren't going to be able to vote on it until the second reading. So next month is kind of a free-for-all for people to come on out and give your input on the ordinance and what changes you would like to see. So please come
It's not going to be voted on, so all input will get on record and they'll go into the next meeting then and maybe discuss it again and vote on it. Okay.
Right.
Someone posted in the chat that Warren's meeting is tonight. So those of you in the area.
Yep.
Keith
Olson. Thank you, Keith. All right.
Oh,
So
that guy, the guy from Warren, the councilman, Kapuscinski, he was the one that said that he wrote this letter to the DEA asking them to bust up all the caregivers. And so if that means tonight, you guys could go on there and meet this lovely fella.
so just to wrap up a little bit, and then we're going to kind of spin it around to end the show. This is the other way that caregivers are being attacked. They've been attacked ever since the law passed. The MCMA stuff that we discuss is another way. There's many things we can point to, and we have to stay vigilant. And when we do, it seems to work on all these fronts. And your energy that you've brought to this is very important, Jen, and I appreciate it a lot, and I think it's much appreciated by the community at large. And with that, we had a great show today. Thanks for being a part of it.
Thank you.
And let's just spin around here to see what anybody needs to say. Anything anybody needs to plug, anything. We'll end up with Rick for final thoughts, and we'll leave it at that. So, Colin, any reflections on today?
Not really too much. There's a Michigan Psychedelic Society meeting on July 17th, I think. That's really the only psychedelic event we got really coming up. We're on break from the Antheo show for the next month. So, yeah.
Antheo Fest is being planned. Yeah. September 19th. So it's coming up. More.
All right. We'll have to talk more about that.
Irwin for Senate.com. Remember that. And Jenny, I wish you so well with your city, and the truth will come out, and all those people and all their corruption will be exposed, and it's just going to take a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I hope we can do maybe even a voter referendum in Vienna Township, because maybe the residents will agree that that one's too strict. So that could be an option for Vienna Township. And if anybody has done one of those before, or would like to help explain to me the next steps, that's something in the future I'd like to work on. So thank you so much again for having me. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Jen. And thanks for expanding your advocacy beyond your own hometown and talking to people in far distant places to try and spread that word, because oftentimes we only work on the things that are important to us locally, and then we stop when things are bigger. Thanks for not doing that.
I'm not quitting.
Good. We'll see you this Sunday.
All right, I will see you then.
Good. So as far as wrapping it up, let me just say, I'm sorry, Jen, did you have any more?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine. You just give me the finger. All right.
She'll be back anyway.
Yeah. I think so. Important to remember, the issues facing Michigan cannabis consumers are multifaceted. What we have are local municipal issues, threats in our legislature, problems with public perception, and we still have a lack of respect for what the medical marijuana law said in 2008, and it's rampant. What we really need to have is greater representation for consumers, both licensed patients and caregivers, as well as non-licensed, just cannabis consumers. Greater representation with the Marijuana Regulatory Agency, and greater representation in a lobbying way in our Lansing legislative offices. And hopefully, within the next 6 months here, we can accomplish some of those things and have a greater presence and actually have the voice of the people be heard in the halls of lawmaking, where it really should reign supreme. Our 2008 law was voter-directed initiative. It remains unimpeachable. You can't change it just because local communities think they can. And we have to take the appropriate steps to protect the people while court cases are being wound through the system. A lot of work to do. A lot of inspirational people doing it. Please stay tuned. Jazz Cabbage Cafe. We love you.
Right on. Jazz Cabbage Cafe. Thank you guys very much. See you next week.